Wondering how your mindset affects your life? How to bring more energy into your business and life? Millions of people around the world ask these same questions daily. You are in the right place. Learn practices that will help give your life the meaning and success you've been searching for. Welcome to the Charge Podcast, teaching you how to create habits around real goals every day. Practical life advice from those who made it. Here's your host, Gary Wilbers.
Chargers, welcome back to the Charge Podcast for another great podcast. Are you enjoying the information that we're sharing with you each and every week? I tell you, my goal is to find great podcast guests that will give us great information that you can take action in your life. And guess what? I think we did it again this week. I'm not going to brag, but I'm going to say we found a really good topic for you that you're going to truly enjoy. And today we've got with us Ron Carucci. He's the co-founder and managing partner of Navalent, working with CEOs and executives pursuing transformational change for their organizations, leaders, and their industries. He has a 30-year track record of helping some of the world's most influential executives tackle challenges of strategy, organization, and leadership. From startups to Fortune 10s, turnarounds to new markets and strategies, really allows him to make that difference of overhauling the leadership and the culture to redesigning for growth. He has worked in more than 25 countries and on 4 different continents. In addition to being a regular contributor to Harvard Business Review and Forbes, he has been featured in Fortune, CEO Magazine, BusinessInsider, MSNBC, Business Week, Smart Business, and other thought leader publications. Now, I am so glad to welcome you, Ron, to the Charge Podcast. Welcome, Ron.
Gary, great to be with you. Thanks for having me.
Well, thanks for joining us today. We're going to get into your topic and really talk about some of those challenges and that transformational change that is going on in organizations across no matter what type of business you're in. If you're in small business, large business, and corporate environment, government, it's happening across, and we're going to get into that in just a minute. But before we do, if you don't mind, I always ask each podcast guest about my acronym or my mantra of CHARGE, create habits around real goals every day. What habit or habits do you think has led to success in your life?
It's one of tenacity and perseverance. I think, and I know it sounds cliche, Gary, but as I thought about your question in advance, I looked at how I spend my days and my time. I think what others would say of me, and I don't. Sometimes this can be a fault, right? I think you can be overly resilient or overly tenacious and get too many brick prints in your forehead. But when you want something bad enough, when you see an end in sight, you've got to keep a vision of the transformed state in mind at all times. And as cliche as we've heard a million versions of not giving up, even when you're so sure that you just have no more gas in the tank, and I'm saying this right now in my life, in the midst of a challenge where I feel like I want to put my hands up, I want to go, I can't do it anymore. But and there are times to let go. There definitely are times to let go. You have to know wisely when those are. But so often I see leaders, throw in the towel way too early.
Yeah. And some of them sayings is right before you're the finish line, you're at the 90-yard line about to score the touchdown, that sometimes if we don't have that tenacity, we give up too early.
And you may not know you're at the 10-yard line. You may not know. Yeah, it's the classic, dying on Heartbreak Hill, right? Yeah. You're just halfway up, and it's so much easier said than done. I know, but I think when it comes to success and goals, it's so easy to get distracted. It's so easy to be enamored with an idea and forget that all great visions.
Yeah. Well, I appreciate you sharing that because I think it's important because, we're new in the 2020. And like I've been telling my audience for the last several months is we're not just talking about it's a new year, it's a new decade. So what do you want to accomplish? What do you want to move forward on? We all get challenged in that. So what are we willing to do to keep fighting and being tenacious to get to that goal line, to get to where you want to be? And I think this is really important because with your topic, it's about transformational change and working with organization leaders and industries. And let's be honest, this decade, the world is going to change even more. We thought it changed a lot from 2010 to 2019. I think it's going to go even at a faster pace. And I had a futurist on my podcast recently back, and Thomas Fry was talking about, think about things like Ubers and that's out there that was never there before. We're going to see some new things that's going to happen, and transformational leaders is going to be huge. But I think your topic that I really thought we'd go into is that area of truth. Why has withholding or distorting truth become so accepted in organizations? Because if we're truly going to be a good change organization, transformational, we're going to have to be able to get the truth out there, but organizations holding it back. So I'm kind of curious we're going to kind of go that direction first, if that's okay, Ron.
Yeah. It's the newest area of research. It is the project where I'm ready to throw my hands up. Because it's a controversial topic. People don't want to talk about honesty. And the thing that we forget on the other side of that coin is everybody wants to talk about purpose, right? Everybody's talking about wanting to find meaning in their work and find a reason to be and get in touch with your unique calling in the world. And that's all well and good, but you can't do that if you're not being honest. And everybody is doing what I call purpose washing. It's a way organizations are trying to make themselves sound good because they're doing community work or sustainability work or being good environmental stewards. But the reality is, if you want everybody in your workplace on fire, sold out for the direction you want to take, they've got to believe that the reason they are on this planet is attached to what you're doing. And if you are creating conditions under which they cannot tell the truth, they will not feel purpose-driven. They will feel duplicitous, and they'll feel like they have to hide. And so we did a 15-year longitudinal study with more than 3,300 interviews with leaders to understand what are the factors. We all read the Wells Fargo story. We all have read the Theranos story. We all know that we're sick about hearing about Harvey Weinstein and the horrible things he did. And so we think those were individual bad actors. But the truth is, 5,000 people didn't wake up at Wells Fargo one day, all at the same time, and say, hey, here's an idea. So what were the conditions? Harvey Weinstein's horrible behavior has been around Hollywood for decades. What are the conditions under which it thrived? I wanted to understand, how do we turn otherwise honest people into dishonest people? And so we found 4 factors. We found 4 things that will predict in your organization, it doesn't matter how big or small it is, whether or not people will lie or withhold the truth. And if you're a leader, here's a very simple standard. If you're leading people, you're leading a small business, you're leading a department, and at least twice a week, somebody is not in your office telling you something that's uncomfortable to hear, you can confidently assume your leadership sucks. Because you haven't created the conditions under which people will tell you what you need to hear. And it cannot be that everything's just going well. So the 4 conditions, one we called strategic clarity, meaning be who you say you are. We all have a mission statement, we have a vision statement, we have goals, we have things we declare about our identity as a company. And when our actions belie those statements, in the minds of people, it all may make sense to you, but in the minds of those you're leading, if what you're saying and what you're doing don't match, you are 3 times more likely to have people lie or withhold the truth.
Wow.
Accountability. If the way you measure performance, not rewarded, not paid for it, but the way you count performance is viewed to be unfair, meaning people believe that what you're assessing their performance to be does not match what they believe they did, you are also 4 times more likely to have people lie or withhold the truth. Decision-making. If the way your company constructs choices, if in the meetings people can't tell the truth, if the people gather around the table to solve the problem, make the decision, allocate the resources, if that is seen to be not transparent or not honest, and the only information people can rely on is on the underground and collusion and gossip, you're 3.5 times more likely to have people lie or withhold the truth. and rivalries. If at the classic seams of your organization, where sales and marketing meet, where operations and R&D meet, where administration and field sales meet, any seam in your organization, if there's unresolved conflict where people feel like there's dueling truths, where you fragment the truth, you are 6 times more likely to have people liable to hold the truth. And team building is not the answer. And the sad part about the statistics, Gary, is that they're cumulative. So if you lack strategic clarity, unfair accountability, not transparent governance, and cross-functional rivalry, you are 16 times more likely to find yourself on the cover of the New York Times in a story you never wanted to be in, or whatever your local newspaper is. And they're all controllable. But these are factors that are not that are systemic. They turn individuals who would otherwise be inclined to want to tell the truth into believing that they have no other option but to withhold it. And to your point about what's coming in 2020 and beyond, and the levels of disruption that people are going to see on the horizon, if people aren't in your office telling you what they see coming down the pike and they believe you're missing it, those are not good conditions for success.
No, and it's how will your organization move forward? And as leadership is really being open and honest to be able to receive that information. It comes to the core of what you're talking about there, to be able to receive that. Some staggering statistics, I mean, just unbelievable that you see there. And I just, I guess my question, I'm thinking about going 10 different ways, but my question really is, how do we find that courage then? Because we're not that leader.
Right.
But to really approach that leader, to be more honest and get them to understand how important this is, not only for yourself, but for your organization.
Well, I think one of the calculation factors in our data was the issue of psychological safety, meaning do people feel like it's safe to tell you the truth? I don't think there's a leader in the world that would wake up one in the morning and say, how can I get my people to lie to me today? What can I do to make sure I don't hear honest information? Most leaders would say, I have an open door policy. I want to hear the truth. You can tell me anything. And then you have a reaction that's defensive. You dismiss it. You welcome the feedback, you nod your head and do nothing with it. So inadvertently, you may be doing things that you don't realize are actually deterring people from telling you the information. You have to go ask for it. And around your table, it's not enough to just simply make psychological safety a condition under which people might choose to raise uncomfortable issues. You have to make it an expectation. If you're a leader in this organization, it's your job to say the hard things. Even if one of those hard things is about your colleague. You need to say it respectfully and kindly and thoughtfully and helpfully in a way that helps move things forward, not just gritches. But it's your job to say it. You don't get to sit around a leadership table and say, not my department, not my problem. And you have to set the standard that's what's expected. And as much as people can get dinged for all kinds of performance reasons, if you find out that somebody had information about a problem you faced and withheld it, you should fire them for that. That's what will begin to turn a tide to tell people, I expect your voices. I expect radical candor here. I expect, ruthless honesty here. We just simply cannot afford to have people colluding with the system, withholding information that could solve real tough problems here or please our customers or make our products better just because they're afraid. But too often leaders just assume, I'm a nice guy, I'm a nice woman. Why wouldn't they tell me? So no news must be good news. And those are very dangerous assumptions.
Yeah, those assumptions are what gets you in trouble real quick and gets organizations in trouble because they think it's being throughout their whole organization. I guess, so what you're really talking about is those honest environments. And I know they can start from down below, but sometimes our challenges we have is the person that is leading that organization is not setting the organization up for those honest environments. Yep. Is saying the things that you're saying, but then when the first person comes in, yep, they're ignoring it. How do you manage that situation?
It behooves every leader to ask themselves, when's the last time somebody came and got in my face? If I were headed off a cliff, and here's what I tell people, it's astounding to me, Gary, how many leaders in the world still have never had a multi-rater or 360 review. So my question to them is, all right, what data are you relying on to tell you how your organization is performing and running? If you tell me it's a spreadsheet, if you tell me it's a financial data, and you tell me that we committed to a 8% margin and we got that, therefore that means things are okay, you terrify me. I have a dear friend whose wife was a runner, a marathon runner. And the day she ran her last marathon, she was running with stage 4 cancer. But from the outside, you would have never known it. So if you tell me that the data on your spreadsheet or your employee engagement survey is what you're relying on, and nobody is in your face, nobody is raising dissenting views, people are very cautious. And every leader tells me, when I deal with CEOs, nobody's telling me the truth. All the information I get is spun. Everybody's couching things. I'm like, well, then your organization is perfectly designed to get that behavior. So you may not like that. You design the system to give you that behavior. If you'd like a different behavior, you announcing, I'd now like people to be honest with me, probably not going to be enough. And so how are you designing governance? How are you designing accountability? How are you training your leaders? How are you soliciting dissent? I have one CEO I work with who does this brilliantly. He knows, you used to be in information. You remember that back in our day, Gary, where information was power. You hoarded it, and that's how you got your power. Yeah. Today, information is ubiquitous. There's no point in hoarding it. But today, what makes you powerful is whose interpretation of the information wins, right? Well, so we all know a fact base can be read many ways. So this CEO just skipped the part about trying to argue, and he said, everybody bring a dissenting fact base. Bring me dueling fact bases in the room. If you're going to tell me that your facts say this, I want you over there to bring me the same fact base and make it say something else. And he would just stage the fight, rather than and be sure that everybody was, when they were aligned, and they said they were aligned, and they said they were going to interpret the data this way and therefore make this decision. There was no hidden, grin nodding when outside you got a pocket veto. So if you're not staging fights, if you're not having spirited debates, if you're not teaching your team and the leaders around you to have a good spirited disagreement and know that you can go out for coffee or beer or lunch afterwards and be okay, then get on that right away. Because to your point made before, 2020 is coming fast and furious, and this decade's coming fast and furious. We have a new election coming this year. There's a lot of disruption changing. You're absolutely right. The examples you gave before, the hotel industry never saw Airbnb coming. Right. And never took it seriously. The taxi and livery industry never saw Uber coming. There are disruptions hiding in plain sight that we're all going, higher education. How many higher education institutions are still saying online degrees? I would take those seriously. Really? So ask yourself this question: about what are you in denial? About what have you said that's not a problem? That's not a big deal. About what convictions are you absolutely certain? You're so sure you're right. Those are the places to be worried. Because it's the absoluteness of someone's convictions that causes me to want to poke there the most. Because that's where you have not tested your assumptions. That's the place where your fact base has a liability in it somewhere, has a little piece of fungus waiting to grow and just biding its time. And don't wait for those to happen. Go dig them out, because your best defense is a good offense when it comes to the unknown.
Yeah. And this fits. I've got a lot of small business owners, and it may think, well, we're not a large corporation. It fits in your area because those same transformational changes happen. Yep. The same thing, if you're getting from your leaders that they're sitting there in the room and, oh, yeah, whatever you tell, I agree. You're not getting what you hear, because guess what? They're out doing the work. And I'm not saying that you don't know what your customers are saying, but you better understand, we better be prepared for that change. We've seen so much consolidation going on. And why is consolidation happening? Is because the one side is prepared. They're having those conversations. They're making that change throughout their organization. Yep. And as leaders, we've got to be prepared to change with it. And
if you're not, you should be worried. Yeah. And trust me, you can count on this like the back of your hand. Your people are sitting around their dinner tables at night telling stories about you. They are. It's an absolute, people talk about the boss. Do you know what stories they're telling? Mm-hmm. Because if you don't know what stories they're telling, you should assume the worst. So if they're out there on the floor, out there in the shop, out there in the warehouse, out there in the cubicle farm, saying things different than what they're saying around you, that is a legitimate cause for terror. Yes. Because that means they hold the keys to your future and they're not giving them to you. And if they don't trust you with the information, you have to ask yourself, what did I do to create the conditions under which they felt they could not tell me that information? And the answer is something. It's not that just that they're weak-kneed or have no backbone.
Well, and one thing that's happened in the marketplace is 2020, they say 50% of our workforce is going to be millennials and Generation Z starting to come in the workforce. Well, that's an expectation that they expect. And the only thing I always tell my audience is when I speak about this, that may be the generation that is now required us to have those conversations. But the thing is, boomers and Xers and everyone else wants that same information. Sure. And the problem is they've been in the workforce a lot longer. So you may have a little more challenge there because you've got to get that honesty to be there. Well, why are we telling our people this? This is things that we normally didn't share. Yeah. You're going to have to share the why behind why it's so important there. And we kind of talked about this a little bit, Ron, but I think it's important we go back because of how you brought us along with that conversation is coming back to that connection of that purpose and honesty in the very beginning. And kind of, if you would kind of share that, why that is so critical, I think that.
Well, and this goes to your point about generations, Gary. You know, millennials and boomers they want to know they matter. They want to know they're leaving a fingerprint on the world. They do not want just a paycheck. They're not there to mark time. And they have no problem leaving and going and finding someplace else. And the last thing you want, forget about your best talent quitting and leaving. What you don't want is your mediocre talent quitting and staying.
Yeah.
And that's what you'll get. So if you have not created the conditions under which people feel like they can do the best work of their life and become the best versions of themselves, that means people are hiding from you. And if they're hiding, that means they're hiding information, they're hiding their version of the truth. You can't afford that. You can't afford to have somebody on your payroll who's not there sold out for the vision of your organization and has not been able to locate the thing they want to do most in the world in the story you're creating. So make sure your mission matches their mission and give them the opportunity to create that connection. I had one leader that I worked with who was facing a downturn and was having to face some pretty severe cost pressures and was sitting there writhing about where he was going to cut from and he was going to have to cut heads and how was he going to make it work? And I said, well, what advice did your team give you about this? He goes, they don't know how bad it is. I said, well, why would you tell them? He said, because then if I tell them, they'll panic and they'll defect. I said, what if you have to throw them out? I said, what if they have ideas about how to get after this? I said, look at your value statement. One of your values is transparency. He said, well, what doesn't mean we tell them everything? I said, actually, it does. That's actually what that value means. So you are belying the very value you're asking of them. Why don't you trust them? Why don't you bring them the problem? Be honest about where because here's what's going to happen. If you withhold this from them and you have to make some really painful, hard calls in 3 or 4 or 6 months, and they ask you the question, when did you know? How are you going to answer that question? Then you're either going to have to tell the truth and take that heat, or you're going to have to lie. Just tell them. It can't be worse than you in here suffering on your own. He did. They stepped up. They had brilliant ideas. They got after it. Didn't have to lay off one person. Cut a lot of money out of their budget. Had to make some really lean, hard choices. But he modeled what he said he believed and got a better outcome.
Yeah, and I think this key is really understanding that our people do want to help with the answers.
They do.
They want to be the solution. And just think of the engagement that leader received from them individuals. And they made tough choices even. But now everybody's engaged in it versus it just comes from the top down. And here's the problem. Here's what we're going to do. And like, you're the savior. And that's the biggest challenge I think as leaders have to realize. You don't have to be the smartest person in the room.
Well, we already know you're not.
Right.
So, right. So let's stop pretending that you are, and recognize that it was never your job to be the smartest person in the room. Your job is to make other smartest people in the room. That's your job as a leader, is to unleash the brilliance of other people, not show them, how you have all the answers. If you think you're supposed to be the answer ATM, you're in the wrong job.
Great feedback. I tell you, we could continue and go on for quite a while, but it's kind of coming on that time for the recharge round. But one thing I want to ask you, Ron, and I think you may have said it, but if you are that leader and you're sitting there and you're not being honest and upfront, just give a few steps that you would tell them, because of course we've covered a lot in a short amount of time. But my worry is they've heard it, but they've not. How do I take action now? And of course,
I think the very first thing you should do is, if nothing else, do it. Start anonymously. Pass out some index cards to your team and say, what's the one thing that keeps you up at night about our business that you're not telling me, that we're not talking about? What's the one thing you believe we should be talking about that's controversial? There's a moose on the table somewhere. There's an undiscussable somewhere that we're not getting after. Write it on a piece of paper and give it to me anonymously.
I love it.
And at least get something to you. And you know what? My mother always said to me, honey, if somebody calls you a horse's ass, you ignore them. If 10 people call you a horse's ass, you buy a saddle. And so if on those index cards, you see a pattern, that's where you start. And don't start with, why did anybody tell me? Don't get all that. Start with an apology. Start with, it's clear XYZ issue's been on your mind and I've done something to make you not want to talk about it. So I apologize. I'm going to keep my mouth shut right now. And I'm going to ask you to, as honestly as you feel comfortable being, let's talk about why this issue is and what we can do about it. And I will be quiet.
Yeah.
And I promise you will begin to change the culture of your organization if you do that.
And as that leader, let your emotions out of it. When you're be quiet about it, it's also keep your emotions in check.
Don't sit there.
You may not hear something that you like. Stay in check.
You will hear something you won't like, and you'll hear something about you. Don't grimace. Don't wince. Don't pound the table. Be sad. The appropriate emotion is sadness, that you could have been so off your interpretation of what was happening, that you could have believed something to be true that wasn't. But you know what? Be thankful that now you know the truth.
Yeah.
And thank them for their courage, and thank them for the honesty and the forthrightness that they're bringing to you now that will help you solve a problem you didn't even know you had.
What great advice there. I hope everyone hears that. Take note cards, have them tell them what's the elephant in the room, what's the issue we've not been talking about, and then be the person enough to be able to really take the information and hear what they're telling you that's there. Great advice, Ron. Thank you for sharing with that, because I think that's one thing with our organizations. We talk about communication is lacking. Well, the communication is lacking because most of the time it's the honesty that's lacking right along with it. So I truly appreciate that. Well, as we jump into the recharge round, I share it with every guest each week. I ask them the same question, and there's kind of frameworks around what I speak about quite a bit and write about. And I love hearing different people's perspective on it. So this one definitely plays in with leaders, plays in with anyone that's there. How do you believe your mindset affects your daily living?
Oh my gosh. We all have voices in our head that, are telling us things about ourselves that aren't true. Get control of the voices in your head. Understand what they're saying. Know the narratives, especially your origin stories. Know the stories that shape your worst behavior. Recognize they come from a much earlier part of your life and get after them. Otherwise, they're going to continue to shape behavior you don't want.
Excellent. How about, what do you do on the days where your energy is a little lower? What do you do there to generate that energy that you need to have to be able to be productive? You have to exercise. You have to get good sleep. You have to. The basics are there. We now know. We now have the neuroscience study that says our brains have their own power washing system, right? And if you're not sleeping, your brains aren't washing out the toxins, and you're, accumulating beta amyloids that give you Alzheimer's one day. So you have to sleep. You have to eat well. You have to exercise. But beyond that, I think one of the key killers of motivation is isolation.
You cannot be behind a desk, behind a cubicle, by yourself. You've got to be talking to somebody. You've got to have somebody else's voice in your life. So stay connected.
I love that. And then just stay movement too, is, if you are at your desk and you're working on a project, set the timer every 50 minutes or whatever, every hour that you're up and you're moving some, because it's going to make you more productive once you get back to it. How about the number one connection or maybe relationship that's made the biggest impact on your life?
I have a woman who's been my mentor for 30 plus years. And she's 80 going on 40. She's still teaching. She's still feisty and lively and amazing. And she kicks my butt all the time and reminds me of who I say I want to be in the world when I forget. And we all need someone in our life who'll tell us the truth and love us and care for us and cheer us on when we fall and kick our butts when we're stupid. And if you haven't got somebody like that, gosh, you're missing out. I've been very blessed to have her in my life.
Yeah, that's a big one. If it's a mentor, if it's a coach, whatever it is for you, but someone that you kind of really resonate, because we all kind of really, sometimes when we look in the mirror, we see what comes back. We may not like it, but that person that's that mentor or coach will be honest with you and be upfront. That same topic that we just spoke about, they're willing to tell you upfront.
Yep.
How about advice? What advice has influenced you the most in your life?
Well, it's hers. And she told me very early on in my life, nothing in life is irrevocable except death. You get do-overs, right? You get do-overs, and you've got to be willing to take your shots. We spend so much time fearfully talking ourselves out of taking our shots rather than just going for it and realizing, you get a do-over. You'll skin your knees, but you don't make the goals you don't shoot for.
Excellent. Tell me your favorite book and why do you love it?
David White wrote a book called Crossing the Unknown Sea. I think it should be required reading for the planet. The subtitle is Work as a Pilgrimage of Life. It really forces us to take a hard look at our relationship with our work and our purpose in the world, and the hard parts of that and the good parts of that. It's a beautiful, beautiful book. Excellent. I read it, every couple of years I read it.
Excellent. I'm going to check that one out. I have not read that one yet. We'll have it in show notes. So anybody that's exercising or driving or something that we've got it covered in chargepodcast.com. Just go to show notes and we'll have all that information there for you. Well, you've just about made it through the recharge round, but last question I want to leave you is, what legacy do you want to leave the world?
So I want to leave it at a more honest place. I've spent my whole career making communities of people, nations, universe, trying to be more honest about who they are. I didn't need to write it all down. I've done it for 35 years, but I think I want to leave the world a more truthful place, especially in a world where we have dueling truths and fake truths and people, polarized on opposite ends of silly arguments that are not really that polarized. The division we're feeling right now in our world is painful to me. And I think it's because we've allowed ourselves to be dishonest and I think we've so dangerously confused speaking your truth with speaking the truth. And we've got to separate those out. Speaking the truth is not the same thing. And I think we're using speaking your truth to hide behind and making our truth valid just because I'm screaming louder.
Yeah. Oh, wow. You are so right there. And I hope that's one thing we definitely see change in this next decade, because don't like where our society is headed. And it doesn't matter if it's corporate world, business world, wherever, politics, it's just across the board that needs to change. Well, you have something to be able to help us with that, to be able to, speaking with truth. I think you've got a free download that you're willing to share with the audience. Would you share that where they can get that? And we'll have it in show notes also for them. Yeah.
So we have a free ebook on leading transformation. So our playbook for describing what I've described here is at Navalent, navalent.com/transformation. Come visit us, and you can get that free ebook. We've also got some great videos and lots of great articles and white papers and tools for you to download. I've got some new online courses on leadership and being strategic. So check those out as well. So come visit us and hang out. You can also find me on LinkedIn and Twitter.
So check Ron out. Some great information he's sharing with you. I looked at his website before as I was kind of doing my research. Lots of great information, some great articles that you've published there, and check through. I scanned them, I'll be honest, but some great information. And if you're a leader and you're wanting to make that change, now it's about how can I do it? Ron's giving you some of them resources that's available to you. So hope you take him up on it. Ron, I just can't thank you enough for being honest and having this honest conversation with us and being available and really sharing this with our audience. I call my audience members the Chargers, and Chargers want to take action and want to make the change that's there. And we need each person to really start making this change of how can we have these honest conversations, not only in the workforce, but also in your personal life. You know, with your spouse and your significant other and your children, are you having those honest conversations with them? Let your children know when things are tough, you know. You got a tough month coming up in work, share that with them. They're going to be more understanding that way versus daddy or mommy is always gone and they don't really know. Have those conversations with them. So Ron, thank you again for joining the Charge podcast.
Gary, it's been great to be with you. Thanks so much for having me.
Chargers, I hope you take Ron up on it and check out their website. We'll have all that information in chargepodcast.com. I just can't thank you enough for joining us, because I think it's about having conversations about topics that concern us each and every day. And that's what we had today. So as I leave you today, the biggest thing I ask you is if you like the podcast, like it, share it, please share the podcast with others. That way we can keep getting new audience members all the time. And if you can go wherever you listen to the podcast and rate and review our podcast, that helps us find new listeners too, and helps us climb the chart so more people learn about the Charge podcast. Chargers, thank you again for joining us. We're going to be back here next week at the same time. Come back and join us. Make it a great day. We'll see you next week.
This podcast is ended, but your life doesn't just stop. To continue your inspiring journey, head over to chargepodcast.com and access all the tools and resources mentioned on today's show. If you enjoyed this episode, consider sharing with somebody who may also benefit from the advice provided. That's chargepodcast.com. Until next time, charge in business and life.